Mangwanani Malelepo Dumela Mwanave Africa, welcome to the very first Africa Good Morning of the year. To you all, we are absolutely happy to have you here. Throughout the year, we're going to be doing what we do best, which is highlighting the happenings in Africa and beyond. But of course, our focus is Africa, doing our best to make sure you have a good and informed morning. Now, in the first show of the year, SRD grants meant to be a temporary measure, says ANC NEC, that is in South Africa. Donald Trump will change US-Africa ties. How much and how fast? We'll be talking about that. And AFDB intervenes as 11 African countries battle hazardous chemicals. Do follow all our programs on oneup2.com, DSTV 285, GoTV 25, and Network Media Hub on YouTube. We'll be talking to Talent Gore, our correspondent in Zimbabwe, and Ari Hohad will bring us the sport. This is Africa Good Morning. Top stories shortly. In our top stories, the African National Congress National Executive Committee has a long list of objectives for 2025. NEC members announced the interventions during the second day of their national Lekotla held on Johannesburg's East Rand this weekend. The plan focuses on unemployment, access to basic services, and improving the effectiveness of municipalities. This year marks the 70th anniversary of the signing of the Freedom Charter, and alleviating the financial strains on households is a primary goal of the party's work this year. To accomplish this, the NEC is proposing VAT exemptions for electricity, a fuel price cap, and the expansion of the list of zero-rated food items to include nutritious products. They also suggest pursuing a universal basic income grant and establishing an emerging industrialist fund to kickstart reindustrialization to engage the youth. Deputy Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition, Zuko Gondlipi, touted the establishment of a South African National Defence Force-led National Youth Service to drive skills development and employment opportunities. Now, the NEC said it would need to engage the Treasury on these matters, but stated they aim to address municipal debt within 6 months and called for the ring-fencing of water revenue to deal with maintenance and infrastructure challenges. Gondlipi elaborated on the social relief of distress grant, stating that the NEC did not want to increase the number of people on the SRD grant, as it was designed to be a safety net while beneficiaries find work. Our belief is once we fix the performance of the economy and once we get these labor-intensive programs going, automatically people will fall off the SRD. In our next story, Rwandan-backed fighters closed in on eastern Congo's largest city of Goma on Sunday, forcing thousands of civilians and grounding flights from the local airport as government forces battled to stop the rebels from seizing the city. The M23 movement has made rapid advances this month in the Democratic Republic of Congo's mineral-rich but conflict-driven eastern borderlands, raising fears that the fight could spill over into a regional war. The UN Security Council was due to meet a day earlier than planned on Sunday to discuss the crisis, diplomats said, after 3 UN peacekeepers, 2 South Africans and a Uruguayan were killed. 7 other South African soldiers and 3 from Malawi serving in a separate Southern African mission were also killed this week, South African and UN authorities said. 3 years into their current insurgency, the rebels, who the United Nations says received backing from neighboring Rwanda, now control more Congolese territory than ever before. Kigali denies supporting the group. M23 fighters began moving on Goma, the capital of North Kivu province and home to about 1 million people, earlier this week, and have vowed to seize the city. Gunfire and artillery fire could be heard on the city's outskirts from early on Sunday, leading to panic in some areas, residents said. By mid-afternoon, the rebels were approaching Goma's airport. 2 government soldiers said, "We're at the Goma airport awaiting the attackers, who are 2 or 3 kilometers from there," one of the soldiers told Reuters. Now, in the last of our top stories, Africa can expect substantial changes from the United States over the next 4 years. Ramayade, director of the Atlantic Council's Africa Center, wrote in a pre-inauguration analysis while Donald Trump, in his first term, pursued an American-first foreign policy, as he has committed to do again. The new centrality that Africa enjoys on the world stage will necessitate adaptations to the U.S. approach. Yade predicted, although the new administration's Africa policies are evolving, actions Trump initiated hours after taking office will have ramifications across the continent. The long list of executive orders signed the Monday that Trump took office include a 90-day suspension of all foreign development assistance and began the year-long process required to withdraw from the Paris Climate Agreement and the World Health Organization. Now, among the effects of an omnibus set of decrees entitled Recessions of Harmful Executive Orders and Actions was ending the President's Advisory Council on African Diaspora Engagement that Biden established in 2022 during the U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who was confirmed by the Senate on Inauguration Day, can waive the pause for selected aid programs, but the executive orders will have immediate effects. Decisions specifically focused on Africa are expected soon. They include the sanctions imposed on warring armies in Sudan during the final days of President Joe Biden's term. Rubio, who represented Florida in the Senate since 2011, is the senior Trump appointee for developing and implementing Africa policy, although making no mention of Africa in his opening statement during confirmation hearings before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Rubio testified in response to questions that Africa offers an extraordinary opportunity for the United States, pointing to the growth in the markets as well as the consumers. Those have been our top stories on Africa Good Morning. After the break, we decentralize the news by chatting with Talent Gore, who is in Zimbabwe, with the latest stories from there. So, prior to the show, we did manage to check in with talent Gore. She is, however, currently having connectivity issues in Zimbabwe. So we're going to just highlight some of her stories. In fact, I'm being told in the studio she has managed to now join us. Talent is... No, actually, it seems like the connectivity issues are prevailing. So these are some of the stories that she was going to be looking at. Chinese miner pulls gun on worker demanding overdue wages. This has been a trending story in Zimbabwe. Videos were spread on social media, and lots of questions have been asked of the Chinese ambassador in Zimbabwe with regards to the working conditions and the apparent entitlement of some Chinese nationals, particularly working on the mines in Zimbabwe. There's yet been to be a response from the Chinese embassy itself, and I'm sure when there is one, Talent Gore will update us on that. Now, the Medicines Control Authority of Zimbabwe has flagged a counterfeit rabies vaccine which is circulating on the Zimbabwean market, which is obviously very, very terrible to worry about. Rabies, very dangerous to human beings. If you get bitten by a dog with rabies, there's a strong chance that you're dealing with a very difficult health situation. So to have a fake vaccine could only compound such a situation, and we'll be looking forward to an update of that story. Now, in the last of our stories, we were also talking about Donald Trump, right? Of course, in our top stories, we were talking about his Africa policy. U.S. withdrawal from WHO spells doom for Zim's health sector. Of course, we know the Zimbabwe's health sector is already in a dire situation, so to speak. And of course, the U.S. pulling out of WHO would certainly compound that situation. And we'll be looking forward to getting more details on that when we do manage to talk to Talent Gore in Zimbabwe. Let's take a quick break and return with economic news. Now, the African Development Bank has launched initiatives to alleviate the challenges faced by certain African countries grappling with the persistent crisis of hazardous chemicals. In a landmark move, the AFDB recently approved a major initiative targeting hazardous chemicals in 11 least developed countries across Africa. This initiative marks a pivotal step in safeguarding public health and protecting the environment. As the first of its kind by AFDB, the program represents a milestone in sustainable chemical management. The project is backed by a $21.3 million grant from the Global Environment Facility, complemented by co-financing from AFDB-supported projects in urban development, agriculture, and agro-industrial sectors within the participating countries. The project, titled Scaling Up Investment and Technology Transfer to Facilitate Capacity Strengthening and Technical Assistance for Implementation of Stockholm and Minamato Conventions in Africa LDCs, Phase 2, adopts a multi-stakeholder approach to address the urgent need for effective chemical and waste management. These hazardous chemicals, often originating from industrial waste, agricultural activities, and improper disposal methods, pose serious risks to ecosystems and human livelihoods. The targeted LDCs, which include Angola, Ethiopia, the Gambia, Guinea, Liberia, Mauritania, Senegal, Sierra Leone, Togo, Uganda, and Zambia, frequently lack sufficient infrastructure and policy frameworks and are disproportionately impacted by hazardous chemical exposure. Those have been our economic news updates, that one story in particular. We're going to have a look at the indicators before we return with Ari Hochad. All right, for the first time this year, we have Ari Hogad here to bring us the latest from the sporting world. Ari, I'm sure there's a pep in your step, especially considering Liverpool's current streak. We're actually waiting for Ari Hogad right now, but what I can tell you for sure is that Liverpool is on top of the English Premier League, having played 22 games with 53 points. Just behind them is Arsenal, my beloved Arsenal, with 47 points after a 1-0 win against Wolverhampton at Molineux Stadium. It was a very controversial game. A red card was given to Lewis Skelly, and it's been a huge topic with regards to football. That side third is Nottingham Forest, who faced Bournemouth and lost 5-0. A statement win from Bournemouth, who have won most of their games. And then Manchester City getting it done against Chelsea with a 3-1 win. They're going to be proud of that. Manchester City finally finding their way back into the top four. As people know, if you have been watching the English Premier League, at least for the last 5 years, you know this is when Manchester City's form tends to pick up. So we're definitely going to be looking at that, keeping an eye on the three-time English champions. I believe Ari Hogad is here to bring us the sport. Ari, take it away.
Yes, very good morning, Ashwin. Yes, you talked about some of the football there. Exciting season. Happy New Year for everyone in the new season as well. Great 2025. Briefly, it is, as we left it last time, roughly in November, it is Liverpool still leading the English Premier League. They've got 53 points after 22 games. They beat Ipswich at home 4-1. Big title race between them and Arsenal at the moment. Arsenal also winning a tough game against Wolverhampton. Lots of red cards in that game. It's Arsenal winning at Wolverhampton 1-0. They've got 47 points. And then that is the Manchester City in action there. That is Foden scoring. They beat Chelsea by 3-1. And they've got 41 points, creeping into the top four there. Nottingham Forest losing points against Bournemouth, so they've got 44 points. So exciting. That is Arsenal there in action. Big game coming up this Sunday. Make a note of that. It is this coming Sunday, the 2nd of February. It is Arsenal at home to Manchester City. That's a massive game. So that's coming up. But let's go on to the rugby as well. That was the 7th, Perth 7th. South African team, everybody hoping they would do well. They won the Cape Town one. They almost were in a final, a tough semi-final, lost to Australia, but it was Argentina that beat Australia in the final. Big score, 41 points to 5. They're the winners for 2025. South Africa finishing 4th in that tournament. And also briefly, United Rugby Championship, that continued. Good results for the Bulls, beating the Lions 37-22. And then it was the Sharks also winning at Cardiff. That was 42-22. Not a good result for the Stormers away to Leinster. They lost 36-12. And the big one coming up as well, 8th of February at the Cape Town Stadium, Stormers versus the Bulls. Australian Open tennis, it was the first major of the year. Great result for Madison Keys. That was my favorite result of the weekend. Madison Keys of the United States, 19th seed. She beat Aryna Sabalenka, the defending champion, in the final. Tough 3 sets, 6-3, 2-6, and 7-5. That's a great backdrop there in Melbourne, the Australian Open. And it was in the men's final. It was yesterday. Yannick Sinner, he beat Alexander Zverev in 3 sets to be the 2025 champion. Then also briefly golf, it was on the USPGA. Harris English, he is from the United States. He won the first tournament of the PGA 2025 at Torrey Pines. That was the Farmers Insurance Tournament. That is Harris English with his trophy. And Elrich Potgieter, South African, he was in a mix in the final 3-ball, but he played a 78, tied for 15th. And so that's the golf news. And then also, Ashwin, I don't know if you follow the NFL. I love the NFL. Gridiron rugby with the helmets and the American football. The final 2 weeks' time, it is going to be the Kansas City Chiefs. They will play against the Philadelphia Eagles. Kansas City Chiefs dominating the past few years, and they beat the Buffalo Bills 32-29. That's the Chiefs in the final again, and then the Eagles beating the Washington Commanders 53-23. The final is the 9th of February, 2 weeks' time, for them to catch their breath. But I'm very excited about that final.
All right, thank you very much, Ari, for bringing us those sports stories. Like we spoke about earlier. Certainly looking forward to the Super Bowl showdown between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Philadelphia Eagles. The Chiefs beating the Bills this morning, 32-29, which means Patrick Mahomes has beaten Josh Allen 4 times in a row to make sure that he's the one with an opportunity at the Super Bowl. The Chiefs with an opportunity to be the first NFL team in the Super Bowl era to have 3 straight championships. Those have been our stories on Africa Good Morning. Let's have a look at our highlights. Thank you for staying with Africa Good Morning in our first broadcast of 2025. These are some of the highlights from the show. SRD grants meant to be a temporary measure, says ANC NEC, that is in South Africa. Congo rebels close in on eastern city, forcing thousands to flee. FDB intervenes as 11 African countries battle hazardous chemicals. DSTV 285, Gore TV 25, 1up2.com and Network Media Hub on YouTube is precisely where you can find us. From me, Ashwin Bedi, and the Africa Good Morning team, Swera Jaganaka.